Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Data Talk, a show where we talk with data science leaders from around the world. And today we're talking with Dr. Djamila Amimer, and she is the CEO and founder of MindSenses Global, which is a management consultancy specializing in artificial intelligence. Djamila received her PhD in energy economics and operations research from the University of Dundee. Super excited to have her in our Data Talk again. I think this is like number 3. Is that right?
Yes, indeed.
I love chatting with you, and I love always catching up with the work that you're doing. So can you share with everybody in this new year, 2019, what you've been working on or what some of your goals are?
Thanks. Well, first of all, let me thank you, Mike. It's always, a pleasure to come back to the Data Talk show. So very pleased that I've been invited again.
Yes.
In terms of 2019 priorities, so as you mentioned, MindSense Global is a boutique artificial intelligence management consultancy. So what we have been trying to do is, obviously to get more clients to help with their AI journey. There have been some activities that have been taken at the early of 2019. They're still continuing. I'm really passionate about AI education. So I wanted, basically to expand that stream, and some of your audience may have seen that we have launched a new masterclass in artificial intelligence, but mainly, from a business perspective. So the masterclass is entitled Unlocking AI Potential in Business. So it's very specific from a business context, and then trying to teach, kind of like business leaders, executive, inspiring data scientists, how to best unlock AI potential in business, and going through kind of the AI fundamentals, having like deep dive in different sectors, how can we learn from those different applications, but also going through kind of the AI ethics and bias, and how do you spot an opportunity, an AI opportunity in business. So that has been one of my main priority for January. By the way, the masterclass is going to be on the 18th of Feb. And then there is also a big conference for both students and early professional, which will be organized by AI Business Ethics. So it's going to take place on the 8th of February in London. And my company has a stand at the exhibition. So we will be also kind of like, going through kind of the services that MindSenses Global offer, and, trying to get attraction there. But the whole thing is really to get to the point where, we really can help businesses and organizations apply artificial intelligence.
What sort of, so you mentioned that a lot of these classes are really designed to help the business leader that maybe has no background at all in AI, but they definitely want to learn, they want to know how AI can help their business. So the person who's joining your classes, they don't necessarily need to have any sort of background in data science. Is that right?
No, so kind of like basically we have two main audience. So one is definitely what you described. So the business leaders who have no background on AI. So there are like 4 modules in the master class, and one of them is taking them through the AI fundamentals. Obviously, it wouldn't be detailed, but it would be enough for them, to be able to navigate the world of AI. But the other audience for the masterclass are also kind of the data scientists. So those are the people who obviously they're like pro on the technical side, but they haven't been exposed to a business environment. So kind of they may not know kind of how to start applying AI in business, and how to, start, talking the business language. One of our kind of like, values that I'm really proud at MindSenses Global, we are not here, to sell solutions or products. We are here to help, our clients. And we see AI as, a means to an end rather than an end to itself. So our starting point is always by understanding the business problem. And then once we understand it, then this is then when we start, part of the problem solving, we will bring AI as a tool. So I think kind of understanding the business context for data scientists is as crucial as for business leaders to understand AI. So we try to bring the two components into the master class.
How often, I mean, things are changing so quickly, and I'm kind of curious about, for the business leader that wants to stay up to date, they want to make sure they're driving their businesses forward and, using AI when it's going to help them with their business. How often should a business leader who doesn't have backgrounds in data science be taking classes like this to stay educated?
I think it's very important. I think that's like a very important point you raised, Mai, because obviously things change very quickly, especially in this kind of era we are living in. So kind of like my advice is, it's the same principle when you talk about like a business strategy. If you are like a business leader and you devise your strategy, yeah, you have your strategy, but then, every 2-3 years, you will be revising your strategy because things will be changing. So I think I'll take the same line, within, kind of AI or the technology. I think 2 to 3 years may be kind of too long, but, if you don't really have to do it, you have to revise it, you have to refresh your knowledge every 2 to 3 years. That's kind of like the minimum, kind of amount of period. Obviously, if you really want to be a leader in the pack, you will have to do it more frequently than, every 2-3 years. I suggest maybe every 18 months, just like to be, to be ahead of the other players.
Yeah, and what sort of time investment is involved in these classes?
So it depends, kind of like the classes that we offer at Mindsense Global. So they're basically, because we know that people are busy, especially within a business, we don't want them to take them away from their desk or whatever, decisions they make for a long time. So we try, to limit our master classes for one day, where kind of, they have to go out of their office, kind of like usually we hire like an external venue and then we run our workshop. Sometimes we offer like in-house training. So sometimes, we go into their offices and then we offer like a tailored, but usually we're talking about like a day. If there is a specific request, we may kind of expand it to 2 days, but that's kind of the thing. And then if there is any, questions that may arise after that, then, we keep in touch and then kind of we try to help them through our, consultancy services.
It's very cool. So these classes, you mentioned there's a date coming up in February.
Yes.
Are these classes like often? I mean, how often are you doing these classes?
Because that's kind of the business one is relatively a new one, the new class that we are launching. So we are trying to do it on a quarterly basis. So our plan is to have like four classes for 2019. And our first one will be in February 18 in London. But also we will also, test how successful it is, what is the demand, and then we will adjust our plans. Will either increase or decrease, demanding the kind of the demand.
What have been some of the interesting topics, for the people that have taken the classes, especially thinking about those who have never taken any sort of data classes? What are some of the interesting things, takeaways that people have had from attending? Are there any sort of concepts or things that that you have found that students have found very interesting?
Yes, I guess because it's kind of like it is an educational, basically material or, services. So I think because of the hype around AI, there's like, not a lot of them, but there is a certain percentage of people who will come to the class with some, misconception around, AI is difficult, AI, is a threat. So I think through the education, we receive like, kind of, it helps, people understand really what is AI. And then, so that's kind of the first one is, kind of to decipher kind of like the word of AI and make it kind of like in very simplistic, clear term, more understandable for people. The second one is because kind of our masterclass is business specific, and we do deep dives in terms of, we show, case studies in terms of how AI has been applied in the financial services, in the oil and gas sector, in retail, in supply chain. I think kind of the lessons learned from kind of the different application, is also very helpful for the participant, because sometimes even if you already apply AI, but you have only been applying it in a very narrow way. And I think we will be talking about narrow and generic artificial intelligence. But if you have been applying AI in a very specific sector, you may not have like a full understanding, of kind of how it can be applied to another sector. Or maybe if you learn about the challenges of, other sectors that they're facing, that may give you some kind of like clues in terms of how you may approach yours. So there is a lot of kind of like value gained by the cross sharing around kind of how AI has been applied so far across sectors.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing up the kind of the topic you had originally emailed me about moving from narrow AI to general AI, so I love that topic. And would you like to talk a little bit about what you mean by that? Maybe
Sure.
some use cases around how narrow AI is being used, and then what you envision for how we move from this narrow AI to more of a general.
Fantastic. That's really a topic that I'm really excited about. And I personally invest like a lot of time, in this area. So let's define kind of what do we mean by narrow AI, and then by, general AI, and then kind of like we can give like more details in terms of where we are and where we are going. So in terms of narrow AI, so this is really the kind of application we have seen so far. Narrow, or sometimes is called weak AI, just means that applying AI in a very specific sector. So for example, if you're like on the financial services and you have applied AI to develop a fraud detection tool, so that is really narrow AI, because that tool or that algorithm is only going to be useful for that application. If you take that application outside of that environment and you try to use that same algorithm or application to solve another problem, then it becomes completely useless. And this is what we mean by narrow. The value of AI is only valued and applicable to that specific application. As soon as you take it out of its environment, it becomes more or less useless. And that's what we mean by narrow. And most of kind of like in terms of where we are here in 2019, most of the progress and the application by business, by startups, by the big techs have been around narrow AI.
So some examples of narrow AI as you're talking, I'm thinking about just simple things that I use. Maybe like when I'm on Netflix and I am looking for movies or shows, the recommendation engine, the recommendation engine that is saying, oh, you like these types of movies, you'll probably like this. Yeah. That's an example of like a narrow AI.
Yes. Because it only is useful to recommend movies based on kind of your, your preferences and, the category you belong to and the group that, have similar preferences to you. But if you take that application and then you try to ask that application to show, if you are going to, let's say you are going to a concert and that there are like different ways of routes, transport routes, to go there. And you ask that same application to show you the shortest route, it cannot do it because it has been built specifically to answer the movie, to give a movie, kind of recommendation, and not to answer something different.
Gotcha. Okay. And in a similar way, the map AI to find the shortest distance would not be obviously a great AI to be using to recommend a book to me or a movie.
Yeah.
So those are like very, very specific. They're very goal-specific AIs that are helping you achieve a specific thing.
Yes.
But it's not useful to carry it out into another application because that AI is not designed to help solve that problem.
No, because kind of the design at the design stage, the application or the algorithm, whatever kind of like went through the the tool application, it was mainly to solve that specific problem. So as soon as you move away from that problem, then it becomes very difficult to to use the same tool or to adapt it.
I'm kind of curious. What are there any favorite examples that you have of narrow AI, things that you use on a regular basis?
Well, there are like a lot of, as I said, most of the application are narrow AI. So even kind of like when you, let's say kind of like you are looking at your bank account online. And this
Yeah.
is, I'm talking about chatbots. So I'm using the banking thing,
Oh
but it
yeah.
can
Yeah.
be anything. So you are interacting with a chatbot, and then, because it's a banking thing, the chatbot may be, starting, kind of like, advising you or recommending you, kind of financial products, a loan, a new bank account with a better interest rate or whatever. But whatever the language that chatbot will be using will be specific to banking or to financial
Mm,
services. So even within the same area of chatbot, if you take the same chatbot without any changes to it, and
yeah.
then you apply it for this time, you're not going to log into your bank account, you're going to look to log into your cinema or movie account, or that chat box suddenly cannot then start asking you the question that because if the chatbot has been only learning about how to ask financial questions, suddenly they cannot then start asking you about movie, because it has only learned about asking about kind of like finance type of question. This is even very, very narrow. So we are still
Yeah.
staying
Yeah.
within chatbots, but even different application of chatbots, will need to be amended and tweaked to be able to, serve a slightly different purpose.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example. I was just thinking about, I was using an app called Line, which is like a messaging app. And
Okay.
I had developed a Line app, I'm sorry, a Line profile for Experian. Um, and what's great is people from all over the world can interact. And somebody started to interact with the profile messaging. And
Okay.
I think the language was Farsi. And I don't speak Farsi, but the Line App AI like recognized the language, and a
Oh,
bot
that's
came in.
great.
A bot came in and said, "Would you like me to help translate?" And I was like,
Wow.
"Yes." And so then I was able to have a dialogue. I'm writing
Mm.
in English, and we were able to actually have a discussion, and it was in real time, very, very quickly. Thanks to the AI chatbot that came in to help translate.
Yeah.
And that was like a brilliant interaction. I was like, this is so fascinating, how this very narrow AI is being used to help improve communication. Um, and another example I have was I started using an app called Woebot, WOEBOT.
Okay.
And this is it's like a mental health bot that you can check in with, and it asks you how you're feeling, and you give like on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're feeling, and it'll ask you questions, and it begins to like map out like your highs and your lows, like your seasonality of like how you're feeling, like happy, sad. And
That's really good.
it's very cool. And so you check in every single day, and it'll make like it'll ask you specific questions like, oh, why do you feel this way, and it'll begin to chart things out. And it's kind of just a fascinating way of how a very narrow AI is helping to kind of help figure out why emotions are happening.
Yes. And I
Uh,
think that's a very good example of, going back to the first podcast we've done last year in terms of an example of using AI for good.
that's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I think these are all really good examples of narrow AI, and and of course I listen to music on Spotify all the time,
Mm,
and Spotify is very good. At the end of every year, it develops like a
yeah.
playlist for you, like based on all the music you listen to, like here's what you think you should be listening,
Yeah.
And all my friends I've talked to are like, oh my gosh, this the Spotify AI is brilliant because it's recommending music to me that I never would have listened to otherwise. And
Yeah.
so I think all these cases of AI that I use or usually read about are very, very specific.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can see some other application like using AI, to detect, breast cancer, or skin cancer, or kind of like diabetes and so on. So those are like very, very useful applications. But again, they're like there to solve very specific problems. So if you take them out of their current environment, then they wouldn't be able to operate outside of that. So that then takes us to kind of what do you mean by general AI. So there are like quite a number of words to it. So it's called general AI, it's called strong AI, it's called real AI. But I wanted just to say that this is very different because there is another third of AI that we will not kind of tackle today, but it's kind of super intelligent AI. So the third category, which is not in this topic, this is really kind of like the science fiction type of category. So this is where kind of AI and robots become so super intelligent that they take over kind of the humans, and they become the one ruling. So we're not talking about that.
Okay.
We're very, very far from that.
Is that is that called the creepy AI?
Yeah. So that's kind of it's right now it's just like science fiction. We are very far from that. So the general AI, or kind of the strong AI, this is where kind of we are talking about AI that can exhibit some kind of like human type of thinking, and where we can basically the tool can learn. So you take it from one application, it takes the learning from that application, and then it uses the learning to be able to be used in another environment, in another application. Let's kind of to be realistic, let's say kind of like this type of strong AI, we don't have it yet. There are like obviously some big players that are like working on, but it hasn't yet achieved. So obviously you have the like of Google, and specifically DeepMind, with their AlphaGo and AlphaZero. That's kind of a first step towards general AI, but they would admit themselves, that it's not yet at that stage, but like it's definitely going that way. You have the like of obviously Facebook and Microsoft, they're like the big players who have opened labs specific to do research on how to achieve general AI, but we are not there. So kind of the key component of general AI is what we call transfer learning. So the ability to transfer the learning from one application to another, from one environment to the other. And that's what really makes it general AI. And let's make it kind of like very realistic as an example. So this is really trying to model even as how a small child learns and thinks. So for example, if you take a machine learning, and we take the most sophisticated techniques we have in AI right now, which is deep learning, the way, and then let's kind of, we have like a bunch of photos of cats or dogs. Let's choose a cat. Yeah. So the way that the deep learning, the most sophisticated kind of AI technique learns how to differentiate cats from non-cat photo is you feed them kind of 1,000, maybe millions, whatever kind of like how many photos you have. You feed them like a huge amount of photos of cats. And then kind of the deep learning, kind of algorithm, then, using statistical and, artificial neurons with, several layers between the input and output to learn basically to classify the photo of cats. Whereas a child, you wouldn't need to feed thousands or hundreds of photos to a child, even toddler, maybe like a 2-year-old toddler. You may show maybe one picture, maybe two, at maximum 2, 3, and the child will quickly learn what is a cat. Yes. And then if you take the photo out of the hand of the toddler, and you ask the toddler, describe to me how a cat looks like, even with their limited language, they'll be able to describe it to some extent. They may be able to say, yeah, it is a small, it's a small animal. It has a tail. It does meow. This can, it can describe to you. Yeah. Whereas the most sophisticated AI technique, first of all, you have to feed in kind of like a lot of picture for it to be able to detect, what's a picture of a cat. But then if you ask the machine, describe to me a cat, how a cat look like, then the machine cannot answer that. So this is what differentiates between kind of, general AI, and a narrow AI. And we are not yet there, but they're like steps into that. There is also a very good example by DAPRA, which is the US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So back in, I think, around September 2018, they announced a 2 billion campaign to develop what they call the next wave of AI, which is really, the general AI. So the way DAPRA looks at AI, it looks at 3 waves. So the first wave is what they call describe. So this is handcrafted knowledge, or this is kind of how they describe it. Then there is the second wave, which kind of they call it statistical learning. And this is really where we are, we have been kind of in the second wave. So, the lack of deep learning, regression algorithms, most of the machine learning techniques use statistical techniques. So kind of that's the second wave. And then the third wave, this is really what is general AI. They call it explain. So we are talking about like the ability to contextualize concepts, to understand the concept. So kind of this is where DAPRA is putting a lot of money, to go into that third wave. So, and obviously they have different, kind of like programs on how to, try to achieve general AI. So I used the example of, trying to model how a child learns, but then there are other programs where they're looking into nature. So one of the program is looking into small flying insects. So kind of that is kind of a theory that obviously some of the small flying insects, that, obviously they are so tiny, they can generate a lot of computation in a very tiny, kind of brain, compared to kind of their body mass. So they're looking into studying how, how insects use energy in an efficient way to do impressive computational capabilities. And they're trying to study insects to see kind of how they can learn from the insects and apply that to AI. And that's obviously one way to go into general AI.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I saw something recently. I saw some video with, I think, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
He went to a laboratory to look at different ways that robots were being used and also AI. And there was one example of it. I think it was like an insect that they had developed that was like a little robot that could actually fly. The only problem they're having right now is the power. How do you power this little tiny insect to fly around? So that's one of the issues they're trying to solve. But right now, the insect can fly holding on to a little power cord. And it was just brilliant. It was like amazing to see this little robot, like you're describing, this little insect that can actually process and begin to, I guess, try to understand the world around it. But yeah, it's fast. So right now, there aren't really any examples of a general AI?
No. So I guess like the closest you can, if, it's debatable whether it is general AI, but the closest example, if kind of we ignore, the criticism that has been addressed to, is the DeepMind application of Alphago. So it's not general AI, but it definitely shows some characteristic, heading towards that. So that's in terms of kind of what is publicly available. And then assuming, the lack of the programs that DAPRA, the defense, agency is working on will be Gen AI, but obviously it's not in the public knowledge. And then, the big guys like, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, they are, they have their own labs where they're working on it. But we don't have yet anything that, we could, fully claimed as being Gen AI. But, those big guys and those kind of like big governments that are definitely working towards that. Now, maybe kind of like maybe a question to ask ourselves is kind of what should be the characteristic of general AI? So we have narrow AI, and what kind of building blocks we need to have to be able to achieve, general AI. And in my mind, there are like four blocks. So the first block is it's more kind of like a philosophical at the core of AI, or at the core of how AI has been used so far. So far, AI reasoning, the reasoning behind AI has been done by association. So anything that AI has been applied to, it has been applied mostly using statistical techniques. So this is kind of basically finding a correlation between inputs, and then using that correlation to induce a certain type of reasoning. So if I take the case, so if we have, for example, malaria and fever, so then the machine, the AI, will find correlation between malaria and fever. I think for us to move to general AI, we need to move from the association or the correlation to what we call cause-effect relationship. So rather than trying to find a correlation between malaria and fever, the cause effect, the machine or the technique or the thinking, the machine will have to understand that malaria causes fever. And that's what is called by causal reasoning. So that's kind of one of the building block. We need to move into causal thinking, into causal reasoning, into kind of understanding the relationship between cause and effects. So that's the first building block towards general AI. The second block, which I have touched on it, is the transfer of knowledge. So it's kind of like really working on the contextual aspect, how you can take concepts and context and take a learning that can be transferred from one area to the other one. And that's kind of the like of what DeepMind is trying to work right now on it, and Asudapra. So that's the second block. The third block, kind of so far, and specifically with the rise of deep learning and its popularity, that has given rise to kind of like the need of use a huge set of data to train the model. And I think the third block to attain general AI, we will have to move away from having to use a huge set of data to train the model. We will have to find a way how we can train the model with less data, or with the same amount of data but with less energy, because kind of the energy needed to compute that, it's significant. And I think that's kind of what the example of the DAPRA example on the insect, and learning how an insect can use its energy in an efficient way, belongs to that third block. And then my fourth block is really around about kind of the algorithms so far. So far, obviously, there have been huge significant progress in AI, and the most popular one in deep learning, is deep learning. And obviously, it has its kind of like pros and cons, but then, you could argue the amount of application and the added value that deep learning has brought to us outweigh the negative bit, in terms of, some of the bias, the difficulty in explaining, the outputs. But I really think that the fourth building block to move to the general AI, we would really have to think outside of the box. I don't think deep learning will do it anymore. We will have to come up with a new type of technique, with a new algorithm that move us to that. So my fourth building block is first the causal reasoning. The second one is a transfer of knowledge. The third one is moving away from, using huge set of data. So it's kind of the efficiency of the computation. And then the fourth one is moving to a new territory of algorithms. And I think those four building blocks will take us to general AI.
So you had mentioned that you think that the closest we've come is with the DeepMind. Is that right?
Yes.
The Alphago, is that?
Yes.
Would that be a really probably the closest example where
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
In my view, so obviously AlphaGo and AlphaZero, it's well documented, so you can, anyone can Google it and, kind of like find kind of, so I think kind of, I think kind of like I will have to be naive to believe that kind of the only thing that AlphaGo, AlphaZero has achieved was kind of obviously beating kind of like the expert in chess, or like beating the expert at the Go game. I think kind of like for me, why I'm classifying it AlphaGo or AlphaZero in that kind of first step of general intelligence, it's kind of, and I think it's not in the public domain, because you will have to understand that this general AI, it's like very, very competitive. Everyone is, so obviously you wouldn't find kind of the exact kind of like thing behind it in the public domain. But what is kind of fascinated for me specifically around kind of this DeepMind application, because you see kind of like, and specifically, so if you take like the chess, for example, kind of like game, it's it used like a lot of strategy and a lot of movement. So if the machine can kind of memorize or can go through the different kind of millions type of movement, I guess kind of I wouldn't classify this as general intelligence, because if it can beforehand do figure out all the moves, then it can find the best moves. But I'm fascinated by the Go game bits, because this game has more intuition than strategy. So obviously you don't see it in the public domain, but kind of my feeling, I feel that kind of like DeepMind has put its hand in something around the intuition. So if they have discovered around kind of how to make AI more intuitive, that's definitely a first step in towards that general AI. But this is only my personal reading behind kind of, what could be behind that application.
Oh, that's a really good example. How soon do you think we'll be at that place where we'll have a general AI?
That's a very difficult question. Whatever I'm going to say, it's going to be wrong.
We'll preface it with that.
It's like, kind of like a dilemma question, because on one hand, when you look at kind of what has been applied so far, which is mainly narrow AI, you will think that, we are so far from general that kind of, it's going to take ages. But at the same time, I'm like a great believer that like disruptive type of thinking could happen very quickly. So kind of, I am kind of like in the middle. In one hand, the evidence show that is going to take a long time to go there. But on the other hand, my intuition and my kind of previous kind of experience tell me that like things can happen, more, quicker than we anticipate. But I wouldn't dismiss that there could be a breakthrough maybe within the next 5 to 10 years. But as don't quote me in that.
Right, of course
not. But I wouldn't be surprised that within the next 5, maybe kind of pessimist 10 years horizon, that there will be a breakthrough in, general AI. And so, I really think that I'm going to speculate. I don't think kind of the breakthrough will come from the big guys. I'm really a believer that the breakthrough will come from maybe an individual, or maybe a small company, or it will be from kind of like maybe someone that is not really known, for now, or not necessarily popular right now. Because I think to achieve that, you will have to bring a different type of thinking. So you have to break through that, if you are like a big corporation with a certain culture, with a certain type of thinking, you will have to, really kind of like stop that, start from scratch, and then that will then take you to general intelligence. So I think, I wouldn't be surprised if it would be a new, an outsider or new player to this area who will find the breakthrough.
Where do you think, when we finally do have a general AI, what would be some like immediate use cases you would see specifically in the data for good arena? Because I know that's something that you're very passionate about.
Yeah. That's a very good question, because kind of like, even though with this race, into getting to Gen AI, I don't think that people have really asked that good question. Once we achieve it, what
Yeah,
are we
yeah,
going to do with
yeah.
it?
Because
I
I
think,
see all these like sci-fi movies, right, in the
yes.
future, with these general AIs that you can talk with, have relationships with. And so
Mm.
I'm kind of curious about, yeah, like your thoughts on where is this headed?
I think so. Let's talk about AI for good, because this is
Yeah.
what I'm passionate about. So I think it will be very useful in education, because kind of like in education, obviously you have different topics. You have science and
Mm,
maths and history. So using the transfer of knowledge. So using lessons from one topic to the other one will be an added value in education. The other added value of that type of general AI is definitely in, I think, kind of in health, but like in terms of discovering, kind of like new treatments, or like new way to treat kind of like disease, like let's say kind of the diseases that has not yet been treated, like Alzheimer, or other diseases. I think kind of like, if the general AI can grasp the idea of like a cause effect mode and move away from the correlation, we may be able to discover like new drugs or new way to treat illnesses, if that cause effect is fully understood by the machine. So I think that could be one really good application for AI for good. But I think it can also help in terms of kind of, I think it will be a different words, because I think kind of, because right now the narrow AI can solve kind of, maybe let's say, thousands of individual problems, but on its own it cannot kind of like use the different data to kind of like solve a much bigger problem, for example climate change. So any type of problem that has like either a cause effect type of relationship that is important to the solving of the problem, or that has like a cause effect across sectors, like climate change, or
hmm
health, anything that like needs kind of like connected dots to be really connected, then general AI will be useful in that way.
Brilliant. I mean, this is really exciting. I love the example you gave about general AI being used in education, because I think about all the children
Mm,
who would benefit, and adults, myself included, that would benefit from having a general AI teacher, right? Just thinking about what we talked about at the very beginning about
yes.
how do you keep on top of all the changes happening with
Yeah.
business and AI, and your company is helping to educate business leaders in data
Mm,
science and keeping them up to date and how to use AI in business. But imagine having a general AI that would be that kind of that program that you would interact with, that would be keeping you on your toes, keeping you
yes.
educated, right? Also understanding how you learn best, um, and then
Yeah.
taking that to children, where you build to educate children and have very tailored education just for them,
Mm,
for their learning needs at their pace. Because I look at the current situation where you have overcrowding in schools.
mm,
You have so many teachers that have too many kids, and every child has different learning needs. And if we had some sort of general AI that would be able to assist the teacher to be able to tailor education for
mm.
each of these children, that would be brilliant. That would be
Yeah.
amazing.
I really do believe that general AI will help us solve the problems that we haven't yet solved, like, climate change, like diseases, really big topics that kind of,
Hmm.
narrow AI cannot help. But to go back to narrow AI, I really think then achieving, or, kind of developing general AI will also make narrow AI more useful. So it doesn't mean that we get rid of the narrow AI, but then the narrow AI will become more useful, more accurate. So let's go back to the chatbot example.
Yeah.
So right, obviously we have chatbots everywhere, but I hope that you do agree with me that like not all of the chatbots come across as intelligent. Sometimes they ask
Oh
questions.
my gosh. No, I mean, like, unfortunately, like
It's
my
like
interaction
what?
with chatbots, from back in the day. I'm kind of like I'm not a big fan of chatbots because my experiences have not been that great
Yeah.
overall.
And I'm sure you are not the only one.
Yeah. So I've not had very good examples of it. And so, yeah, so I'm with you, but they're getting better. They're getting better.
Yes. Yeah. And then the same thing, with kind of the movie, recommendation example, not all of the time, the algorithm will recommend you. Sometimes the recommendation, you are just gobsmacked, why, I can't really understand why you are suggesting to me this movie, because I have absolutely no intent to watch it. So I think kind of like, in addition for general AI, to open for us new horizons to solve like much bigger problem, it will make the current narrow AI better, more efficient, more accurate, and more kind of like, we will be able to customize, the application to really the individual needs. So I think it will be a win-win. So it's not kind of, let's forget about narrow, we will have a better narrow AI.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll be so much happier when recommendations get better and better. And I was just talking to a coworker yesterday about how I had done a search. Now I'm not looking to buy a car, but I had done some searches in Google about certain types of cars, and all of a sudden I'm just getting inundated with car ads.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a person I never buy new cars. I always buy used cars. And my car I'm holding on to for a longer period of time. But I'm getting, obviously, because I did one query for a car, all of a sudden, Google, YouTube thinks that I'm looking to buy a car. So I've been getting ads like for 8 months.
Yes,
for apps that sell cars, for different cars. And I'm like, and I keep going into Google, like not interested on the ads, because I've gotten to the point where I'm like tired of seeing those ads. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to like a future where AI and recommendation engines are improved, where we're getting the things that we are interested in as advertising. And I know we're getting there. We're getting there, no doubt. And like you said, with the chat bots, like, as they improve, I'll have more faith in them to actually use them more. I have the same issue with voice assistants. I was doing a data talk a while back, and we were talking about voice assistants, and my interactions with the voice assistants early on, like early Siri, were not good. Like I would like, "Hey Siri," I would ask a question. The answers were never that great, so I was like, "Forget it. I'm just going to type in what I'm looking for." And I'm just faster, and I know I'm going to get my answer quicker. And it's because I've had so many bad experiences with these early versions of narrow AI that I've now kind of trained myself to like, well, I'm not even going to bother, because I'd rather just do a Google search really quickly and get the answer rather than even ask the question and cross my fingers that it's going to give me the right answer.
Yeah, and I think kind of you can see different applications are moving at different speeds. So kind of like you mentioned, voice recognition. So I recently wrote like an article for the Futurist Institute on the AI trends for 2019. And one of the top 5 trends for 2019 is that we expect that there will be better voice recognition application coming up in 2019. So that's definitely an area where kind of like companies are really working hard to catch up with the progress. So there will be things coming up throughout the year.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. So before we go, where can everyone learn more about you, and also the work that you're doing to educate and also consult?
Okay, thanks, Mike. So, very happy to, for people to reach out to me. So there is the company website, that's www.mindsenses.co.uk. And then in there is a section on AI education. So you'd be able to find the link for the masterclass. There is also a Facebook page for, it's just like Mind Senses Global AI. And then I'm also happy for people to, reach me. There is also a LinkedIn, profile for the company, or also like a LinkedIn profile under my name. So whichever means, I'm happy, to be contacted.
Wonderful. So for those listening to the podcast, make sure to check out Mind Senses Global. Do a Google search, find her website. You can also find Djamila Amimer on LinkedIn. And I'm going to put in the links to your Facebook page as well as your website
That would be great.
in the comments of the Facebook video as well as the YouTube video, so that people that are watching can go ahead and go there. For those listening to the podcast, do a Google search for Mind Senses Global to learn more about all the things that Djamila is working on. And it's so cool to see, Djamila, as you're educating data leaders in data science. So awesome. And also just your passion for data for good and using AI to improve our world. So awesome work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being our guest in Data Talk. Always love catching up with you. Always love chatting. You're always doing a million things, and it's so cool to hear what you're up to. And we will have you back for sure, no doubt. Because I always love chatting with you.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to address your audience. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care, Djamila.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.